Hi, I'm Josselin Demelier, and this is Explosive, Runny, Jumpy, Hero, a kinetic first-person platformer RPG where movement isn't just survival, it's progression. When I began this project, I didn't start with a precise hypothesis. What I did have was a clear ambition, to hone my level design skills while creating an RPG that focused not on combat, but on fast, expressive movement. I wanted to see how far traversal alone could carry player engagement. To frame this, I drew from Randy Smith's GDC talk, Level Building in Stealth Games. In that talk, he argued that while designers can't directly dictate aesthetics or dynamics, they can deliberately craft mechanics that support a common aesthetic goal, a vision of what kind of experience the player should ultimately have. By treating that aesthetic as a testable hypothesis, the designer creates a clear target for iteration. For Explosive, my aesthetic goal was mastery of movement. Mechanics like bomb jump and grapple were chosen and tuned with this vision in mind, then tested through play to see if they generated the intended feeling of control, risk, and improvisation. Building on that framework, I shaped this design hypothesis to guide development. If players are provided with creative, skill-based traversal mechanics and minimal narrative handholding, they will develop mastery paths and uncover story through play. This hypothesis framed my decision-making throughout the project. It meant focusing development squarely on movement systems like grappling, bomb jumping, and air control, and testing whether progression could emerge from traversal mechanics alone. The narrative was always intended to be implied through motion and environment. In academic terms, this connects back to the MDA model by Hunick, LeBlanc, and Zubek, and to Ralph Koster's argument in A Theory of Fun for game design. The games are engaging because they let players recognize patterns and master them. In Explosive, these patterns are chains of traversal moves, skills that players refine into their own unique paths through the level. These chains can include techniques like bomb to grapple jumps, double bomb launches, grapple pulting, or even vertical bomb climbing, where momentum from one mechanic flows directly into another. By combining mechanics in this way, players generate improvisational solutions that feel expressive and personal. The design of Explosive is grounded equally in academic research and creative inspirations. Mechanically, it builds on Mirror's Edge, which demonstrated how precise platforming could feel expressive and exhilarating, Titanfall 2, which pushed the limits of chain momentum, Portal, which treats the world itself as a puzzle, and Dishonored, which showed how player agency thrives when systems allow for multiple solutions, especially in level design. Cinematically and atmospherically, I looked towards works like Gaspar Noé's Enter the Void, HBO's Chernobyl, and the modular logic of Japanese metabolist architecture. These influences represent the more urban, decaying side of the game's envisioned world. In contrast, inspirations like Journey and Solar Ash describe the more dreamlike, surreal floating island levels I aim to build. While these contrasts haven't fully materialized in the prototype yet, they shaped a dual vision for how the world Explosive could evolve, ground in decay in one hand and ethereal minimalism in the other. Academically, I continually circled back to Salin and Zimmerman's Rules of Play, which highlights how systems themselves communicate meaning, and Jesse Schell's Art of Game Design, which emphasizes the rule of player expression in sustaining engagement. I also referenced Ralph Koster's A Theory of Fun to anchor the project in the idea that learning and mastery form the core of play. From this foundation, I established 4 design pillars that shaped every system I built. Kinetic mastery, movement as the primary system of play. Traversal as expression, allowing players to shape their own paths through mechanics and progression choices. World as puzzle, environment structured to teach mechanics and invite experimentation. Mystery through motion, narrative and atmosphere conveyed through exploration, not exposition. Together, these pillars embodied my aesthetic goal of mastery of movement. They became the criteria I measured my prototype against. Am I enabling mastery, expression, puzzle-like engagement, and emergent mystery through play? To reinforce this, I created a success-failure matrix. Success meant players felt challenged but capable, able to take risks and make snap decisions, and that they saw multiple paths forward. Failure meant frustration, confusion, or being railroaded into a single solution. This framework acted as my constant reference point for iteration. One of the first mechanics I prototyped was the bomb jump. Inspired by Halo, I still remember having to use grenade jumps to reach Easter eggs in the campaign. The memory of players bending mechanics to reach unintended space inspired me to add it into my own game. The mechanic started as a regular thrown grenade, and through many informed iterations from playtest, it became a placeable bomb that players could set and then detonate with a trigger. In the final playtest, advanced players loved chaining bombs into wild traversal sequences, while novices struggled with consistency and force. Earlier playtests had actually been more balanced, partially because at this stage I wasn't yet fully proficient with the bomb jump myself. As my own skill improved, I fell into kind of designer bias. I began to design levels around my growing proficiency. For me, a bomb grapple combo or a double bomb climb felt natural. For new players, it was overwhelming. This mismatch led me back to the mechanical constraint matrix I drafted earlier on, a table mapping jump height, jump length, and speed of the player. In hindsight, I realized I hadn't anchored my level design tightly enough to these metrics. As Salien and Zimmerman argues in Rules of Play, mechanics only become meaningful when supported by accessible systems. Bomb jumping taught me that mastery can't exist without careful, staged onboarding. The second major system I want to spotlight is the skill tree and ultimate ability framework. The earliest version leaned heavily on stat upgrades, things like extra jump height, faster speed, or multiple jumps. While fun in isolation, this approach quickly destabilized the game. Some players could trivialize sections by stacking mobility, while others had less movement range and fell behind. Level balance became unpredictable and unfair. In response, I pivoted toward a class-based progression system, inspired by RPGs but tuned for traversal. 3 archetypes emerged. The Architect, methodical and safe, suited for players who plan routes carefully. Ninja, high risk, high reward, with tools for precision recovery. The Grenadier, experimental and chaotic, specializing in manipulating bombs for extreme jumps. This approach, built with the help of Reed's modular blueprint tutorials, aligned progression with playstyle rather than raw power. It gave less skilled players creative workarounds without trivializing the experience for experts, and it maintained a consistent difficulty curve across different builds. Playtesting confirmed the improvement. Players enjoyed tailoring their traversal identity, and the game became more replayable as they experimented with different classes. Looking forward, I would combine this framework with collectible skill tokens hidden in difficult-to-reach areas. This would reward mastery, feed into class-specific enhancements, and encourage replayability without relying on stat inflation. This collectible layer could also be the point where Pillar 4, Mystery Through Motion, finally comes to play, tying progression to exploration and atmosphere in a way that strengthens both systems. As Jesse Schell notes in The Art of Game Design, the strength of a system lies in how it enables player expression. For Explosive, the class framework became my way of letting players express a philosophy of movement. One of the biggest lessons I took from this module was how to improve the way I wrote and structured my playtest. Early in development, the way I documented my test was unclear, which made it difficult to separate meaningful insights from noise. Over time, though, I developed a more systematic, use case-driven approach. Each playtest was framed around specific questions such as, can players understand when and where to grapple? How can players be encouraged to explore? I then built levels and scenarios designed to test those questions directly. I also invested in improving my survey design. Instead of vague or leading questions, I moved towards simple, quantitative prompts, asking players to give scores between 1 to 5 rather than choose from a list of 5 statements. This made the data far easier to read and iterate on, while still revealing clear patterns on how different kinds of players approach the mechanics. Together, these improvements transformed playtesting from a loose observational exercise into a structured research process, not only sharpening my understanding of how players engaged with mechanics like grapple and bomb jump, but also made my iteration cycles more deliberate, disciplined, and data-driven. Beyond surveys, I also experimented with different methods of data collection, observing live player reactions, running time split trials, and exploring telemetry. I even attempted to integrate a telemetry plugin that could generate heat maps of player movement and actions, though technical issues meant I wasn't able to get it working for this project. Even so, it highlighted the value of combining qualitative and quantitative approaches to understand player behavior more holistically. The most valuable outcome has been the way it reshaped my design practice. I now think about mechanics not just as isolated systems, but as tools for achieving a clearly defined aesthetic goal, in this case, mastery of movement. The project taught me how fragile onboarding can be when you design for your own proficiency. It highlighted the importance of anchoring levels to measurable constraints, building for a range of skill levels, and testing systematically against success and failure criteria. It also sharpened my approach to playtesting, transforming it from loose observational activity into structured research process with clear hypothesis, targeted use cases, and survey data I could trust. This shift has given me more confidence that I can build, test, and iterate with greater clarity in future projects. Looking forward, there are two major areas I want to expand. First is the progression system, combining the class-based skill tree with collectible skill tokens that push the player toward mastery and replayability. This is also where I see Pillar 4 finally taking shape, as exploration and narrative atmosphere merge directly with progression. Second is the world itself. My long-term vision is to divide Explosive into two contrasting spaces: an urban, decaying cityscape influenced by works like Chernobyl and Japanese metabolist architecture, and a dreamlike world of floating islands inspired by Journey and Solar Ash. Together, these spaces would extend my aesthetic goal by asking players to master movement across radically different environments. As Jesse Schell reminds us in The Art of Game Design, great games sustain themselves by giving players meaningful ways to express who they are. For me, this project was a step forward, giving players expression through motion, and I see that as a foundation for everything I want to build moving forward. In my personal design practice, I'm deeply interested in how we interact with and adapt these spaces around us to meet our needs. I find it fascinating to observe how we express player agency through these interactions. Thank you for watching my presentation on Explosive Runny Jumpy Hero. This game was a blast to make, and if you haven't already, it's available on itch.io for download on Windows and Mac. This project has been much about refining my own design practice. It has been about building a game. If you'd like to see more, I'll be continuing to develop Explosive beyond this module, aiming to push the vision of movement as expression even further. Thanks. Bye.